Hello, everybody, and welcome to a slightly awkward video presentation. I am traveling right now and trying to record this in a not completely uh, expected circumstance, but we're going to do what we can. So, welcome to a little presentation on communicating beyond grades, the nuts and bolts of success, as we see in this stock image. For the awkward introduction part, I am Eliza Rosenberg. I'm a lecturer here in religious studies, which means I'm in mostly a teaching position. And I've just put this together based on some things I wish I knew when I was starting out and some things that I am still working on trying to teach myself and get better about. So let's sort of move into that. I think a lot of us enter teaching and then continue teaching with a set of misconceptions. Everybody has misconceptions about what they're doing. It's a fact of life. So let's move beyond platitudes, as exemplified by this platypus. I loved the platitudes platypus, and I couldn't really resist putting it in here. So one of the platitudes that we've probably heard and internalized is that all communication is valuable and we should always be available to our students. That sounds very nice, but it's a little bit removed from reality, in which, first off, quality is more important than quantity in communication. It's much better to have efficient, high information communication briefly and or infrequently than a lot of low value communication. Second, time is finite and trade-offs are unavoidable. If you're spending 3 hours a day or more responding to student emails, you are not spending that time grading. You are not spending that time course planning. You are not spending that time in student meetings. And we cannot make time and we can't give up sleep on a regular basis. And third, beyond the grade learning, the stuff that we teach students beyond the immediate classroom, beyond the curriculum, includes effective communication. One of the most important soft skills that students need to get from college is communicating effectively, verbally, in writing, and in presentations. And our communications with students can be a place to model that and a place to reinforce that. So, some starting points. Where are we going with this? A question that Marigold has also. So let's start with the obvious point. Grades matter. I know that we're talking about moving beyond grading, but they matter. USU requires us to submit grades for all coursework at the end of every semester, so we're not going to get that far away from them. We also need to assess learning somehow. And even if we got away from grading entirely, something would replace it, and it would not be perfect. It would have its issues too. And third, students understand that grades matter, and they also misunderstand how sometimes. Students live in the real world. They do not live in an economic reality where learning for the sake of learning, irrespective of grades, is at all feasible. But they also do tend to get caught up on grades and the idea that, oh gosh, if I have a B instead of an A in one class, my life is ruined. And one of the things that we can communicate to them is that grades are something that we have a system for. We can talk about how they interpret grades, talk about trajectories of growth. But prefacing all this, grades do matter. And they matter so much. This is where the kind of misunderstanding comes in and the anxiety comes in. It's easy for students to think that they are all important. And I think we've probably all felt this way when we were students ourselves, so we can understand that. But of course, if you just focus on grades, it's easy to forget that grades are ultimately a summary of conclusions about what the student has learned, not an end in and of themselves. And an example of student communications that are grading focused, and many communications are grading focused, is an area where we can kind of think about a signal to noise ratio, as exemplified in this stock image. A noise kind of communication from a student might be, if I get an A on this assignment, how much will my grade rise? That is a question, yes, but that's a question the student could answer if you've got the assignment page set up well by looking at the assignment page. And if you have 100 students asking this question, you've got a lot of noise. And the signal to noise ratio looks kind of like this, assuming that the stock image I chose is semi-accurate. So we want a good signal to noise ratio. We want a lot of signal relative to the noise. Getting from a noise question to a signal question, could you help me narrow down my research topic? That's the kind of communication that is useful and that's worth spending some time on, worth setting up meetings with students, talking it through. And it is also the kind of question that if you answer every single, how much will this affect my grade question, you're not going to have time to address adequately. Again, there are always trade-offs. All right. By the way, your signal to noise ratio being perfect and all signal and no real noise and perfectly sharp and clear, that's not going to happen. But aim for reasonable. So our goal is to boost the signal and to reduce the noise so we can give time and focused attention to things that matter substantively. Caveats, this is all based on my experience, and more importantly, it is based on advice and guidance I've gotten from people who are more experienced and more talented than I am. But of course, it is ultimately filtered through my own experience. What else could it be? So there's that. Of course, you should apply this, adapt it, or reject it as needed. And you've also got my email address to follow up if you have any questions. All right. So with those caveats in mind, the nuts and bolts of communicating effectively with students are sort of the least interesting part, but also the most important. Theories about how humans communicate and what makes learning take place and what kind of interaction facilitates this. High-level stuff, very interesting, will not help if that's sort of where you're stuck. I learned that the hard way. I'm still learning it, of course. So the least interesting and most important parts of communication with students starts with Canvas. USU requires that we use Canvas as a learning management system. I will not share my opinions about their massive user interface update right now, but this starts with having an organized Canvas. This is where your students are going to be accessing your course and learning about your course before they ever show up to class. They are going to be looking at this. They will be referring to it when they have questions, ideally. So start with Canvas and make that your kind of anchor resource for information. Organizing Canvas is absolutely indispensable. First line of business, simplify. The more options you give students for accessing the same information, or the more ways you give them for doing the same thing, the more complicated and the more confused it's going to get. So simplify. That advice you've gotten for giving as many options as possible for everything. When it comes to student communication and Canvas access, throw it out the window, would be my advice. It is much easier for students to adapt to a setup that they don't personally feel is ideal than for all the students to try to figure out which of 10 ways to do something. Next, break the information down into blocks. How you know this already, just reiterating, and block everything the way it works for you, but keep it simple If it seems too simple to you, it's probably not. That's just reassurance and break things down into blocks. Okay, deep breath. For help with Canvas, if you haven't already heard this, the Center for Innovative Design and Instruction on campus is very helpful. You can Google them, it will come up. And yes, I have to look up what that acronym stands for every time. Uh, it will take, if this isn't your first rodeo, you will know this at least factually. Um, but it always bears repeating. This takes time. Getting Canvas set up clearly and really well is a big time investment. It is a very worthwhile one. It pays off very well, but it is a time investment and it takes ongoing trial and error. So when things aren't working, it's totally normal. You'll you will probably get past it. Not, a meteor could strike at any time. Okay. And it's often very helpful to consult peers and TAs, even if they just have a quick look, to get a second set of eyes. This makes sense to me. I'm not sure it makes sense to anybody else. That is a worthwhile way of looking at things. So if you've got this clear signal, if you're using Canvas as the start of a clear signal with limited noise in your communications, you should have two components. One, organized information. Organized information on the course homepage, on each of the assignments pages, in terms of grading policies and rubrics, etc., but organize the information. On the one hand, that's obvious. On the other hand, we all need reminders sometimes. So it should look as nice and organized as this stock image of a very clear desktop and a cat that is actually sitting somewhere other than the keyboard. It'll never be that good in real life. Just like the cat would never sit there in real life. Course policies are an often overlooked tool. But they are a place to go over the who's, how's, and when's of effective contact and communication. For example, let's look at how the signal to noise thing can work in real life. Say a student has a question. A lot of students will email you before class starts to say, "Hi, I'm going to be in your class this semester. How can I succeed in the course?" That's not a bad question to have. But a lot of students get advice, "Hi, it's a great idea to make yourself stand out by emailing your professor individually and asking them this question." And that is potentially useful advice for an upper level student with specific concerns about a 4,000 level seminar, but it is terrible advice to give to students in a 1010 level class, and yet they still keep tearing it from somewhere. So you want to be open to students, you want to be there for them. But if you've got 100 students who have all gotten this piece of advice, you don't have time to reply to them. And you can give them either a draining response or an effective response, or the third option is just a rude response, but I would not recommend that. So a draining response would be you listing the ways a student can be successful and or giving descriptions and explanations for all of them. Oh, it helps to make this kind of notes on the reading. You'll want to pay special attention to that, or the reason we have this assignment deadline policy is X, Y, and Z. You don't have time. And it won't help the student. Instead, I find it much more effectively to politely and warmly refer them elsewhere. So reply with something in this mode, more like, "Thanks for checking in. The course homepage has some useful information under whichever section. Please feel free to contact me if you have any questions about any of it. I look forward to seeing you in class." So you let the student know you're there, you're interested in their learning, but you are telling them where to find the information. You're giving them the tools to answer their own question. You're giving them tools rather than an answer. And that is going to be more effective for their learning, and it is going to be more time effective for you. So, so that an organized canvas is one part of things, and the other are useful policies, some policies that reduce common sources of noise. And these are things that you can put on your Canvas homepage. So this is a policy about communication that I have started putting in most of my syllabi, certainly for all my intro and mid-level courses. I did not come up with it myself. So adapt it and give feedback as you find useful. But I will usually have a policy on my Canvas homepage that's something like this. For significant conversations, schedule an appointment during office hours or, if necessary, another time. Office hours are good. We want to encourage the attendance. Otherwise, if you have a question, contact the instructor or the TA through Canvas message or through email or whatever you prefer. We strive to reply to all messages within 48 hours. It's a reasonable turnaround time. But if the question is an emergency, they shouldn't be asking you. We are not qualified professionally to deal with emergencies. Say, please note that all messaged questions whose answers are in Canvas, e.g. on the syllabus or in assignment descriptions, oh, typo there, bad spelling, will not receive replies. Most students are cool with this, in my experience, but again, we strive to reply within 48 hours. But if you send us a question whose answer is in Canvas or in the reading, we won't reply to it. I also tend to put in there, for the very rare student where this is going to be a problem, the instructor and TA reserve the right to disengage from communication that does not comply with university policies on civil communication, and to disengage from communication that is excessively frequent, lengthy, or distant from the course aims and content. Very few students will need that reminder, but it's good to have that as a policy for those times when you do need it. And again, it's been my experience that while some students may find this a little bit intimidating sounding, most of them get it quickly and it doesn't wind up being a problem. And you will have heard more in this conference about why and how to set up your course policies. So that's one sample policy. Putting it into practice. So let's say a student emails you a question, what percentage of the total grade is this assignment worth? That really is a noise question, not a signal question. Signal question might be, again, can you help me refine my research question? When I have a policy like this in place, the first time a student sends me a question whose answer was available in Canvas, the first time I tend to give a little grace and say something like, dear student, so you address them specifically by name, individually. Thanks for checking in. If you check whichever Canvas page, you will see that this assignment is, say, 1 of 4 in the essay category, which is worth 30% of your overall grade. Regards, your name. So again, it's warm. It is specific to what the student has raised, has asked, but it also refers them to where they need to be to find out the information for themselves. It's sort of a polite reminder of policy. The second time, however, what I found effective is to have sort of an auto message that does not address the student specifically and that doesn't have a salutation or has a salutation like the teaching team. And that one is more like, thank you for your inquiry. Please note that per course policy, answers whose questions are in Canvas will not receive replies. In general, you won't have to use this very often, but it is useful to have in your pocket on occasion. All right, sample policy 2 about grading. I will just put this up there. In my course homepages, I have found it useful to have a section that is generically about how I grade in general, telling students that get detailed rubrics for every assignment on the relative pages, and noting that there are criteria for receiving credit for assignments. This doesn't need to be exhaustive, but a brief overview of how things are going to work grading wise is useful, especially when you tell students there will be specific information on each assignment's page. I have a little notice about mistakes in grades, saying that if we say miscalculate the score, let us know, we'll fix it. And that students are welcome to make a change of grade case on substance, but that they should be aware that we might lower your grade too. Can state your policies on extra credit, on makeup work, etc. But a brief general overview of your grading policies with clear reference to where they can find more specific information. All right, some more noise dampening measures that I found. It may be useful to have course policies on attendance and free absences. I will put some example policies in the supplemental material that I include with this. It may help to have course policies on due dates. That's another kind of frequent noise question. Course policies on grades and on extra credit and on other FAQ areas. This is something to adapt on an ongoing basis. And again, when you're putting this together, you'll want to figure out what your needs are, how you can block information, find a balance between what's informative and what's too much, but we all learn to do that. Crucial factor, though, is a quiz in Canvas in week 1 on course policies. This quiz should be an easy A for students. I give them unlimited time and attempts. It's multiple choice. And it's not, again, the most fascinating exercise, but it can be helpful. And I will include a sample of that as well. All right. Thank you very much. I hope this is a useful ETE for all of you. If you have any questions, please contact me at this email address. You can find me around campus. And wishing everybody a very successful new school year. Thank you.